Hello everyone, welcome to the History Essentials Medieval Indian History. I would like to clarify that I re-streamlined the revision strategy for medieval Indian history specifically, where I won't cover the things through the prism of previous year questions. Of course, your notes are covering the things which have been asked in the recent previous year questions of UPSC exams in the NDA CDS and the last year civil service prelims also. So your notes is covering almost 60% of those unconventional questions which you have in your very recently held exams of UPSC. For example, if you have seen the questions on Balutedars or the questions on Savai Jai Singh astronomical works or about the Rana Kumbha's literary work and their architectural marvels, and the questions based on some the literary works of that period, of the Sultanate period or of the Mughal period, or many unconventional bouncer questions appeared in the medieval Indian history also. But the good part is, if I tell you, you have the things covered in your notes. The questions have been framed from the book of Irfan Habib sir, which we have covered in the form of the notes of medieval Indian history. So that is the reason the notes are very short, only of 60 pages, including the glossary section. And let me tell you, the glossary which I framed, it is basically from the Irfan Habib's book also, and specifically I would like to submit my credit to the book of Iqtidar Alam Khan sir. That's a kind of a dictionary on medieval India. So from there I made notes of around 68 important terms when it comes to the glossary section of medieval Indian history, and you will see the previous year questions set wise, the set of what do you mean by the glossary, the same what I did for the ancient Indian history. So you will have the things in front of you. Now why I am not doing in the same set wise manner these video discussions for medieval history, the reason is your notes will be much more better fine if you revise the notes only in a systematic fashion, because the notes in itself of medieval Indian history I segregated theme wise. Like I have the sets in the chapters only of polity, then science and technology, then if you will see, you have the religion also, then you have the literature part also, then you have the art and architecture also, and at last the society of that period. Fine, so there is no point to make separate video discussions like I did for ancient Indian history chapter wise, because in the case of medieval Indian history your chapters are in itself divided in thematic fashion. Okay, so it will be way more better if you just go through these video discussions, and it will take just around 3 to 4 hours and you will be done with your unconventional part of medieval Indian history. Okay, and believe me, I again emphasize the fact, whoever are reading my notes, do revise your notes properly. Medieval Indian history, just notes will be enough, because the questions, unconventional one specifically I am talking about, they are getting covered straight from the notes, straight from the book of Irfan Habib sir, that is the medieval India story of a civilization, the name of the book specifically. Okay, so without much delay, we should start our first part, which is on early medieval India from 600 to 1200 AD. Okay, so this is your chapter. Yeah, let it load first. Yes, so these are your notes. Fine, the medieval India, the study of a civilization, and in this video discussion we are going to cover part number 1, So what is the importance of this part? Although you have read about these 600 years in Upinder Singh's last chapter, which I already told that it was kind of a transition period in history where we are moving from ancient to the medieval part. But here we will see once again the whole thing from this book also. It deals with one of the prominent factor of change in Indian history, the rise of feudalism. And if you remember, UPSC asked one question on the evolution of feudal and some characteristic of feudal panorama in that time. Then this part will deals in very succinct way with the science and technology, religion, literature and art of these 600 years, and likewise same will be followed for your next part. Okay, that's why I am not covering the set wise video discussions, okay, in the format of set wise video discussion, because your chapters of medieval Indian history notes, they are in itself set in thematic fashion. So let's sum up this transition period of medieval India in thematic manner. So in brief, the period between the collapse of last great North Indian empire of Harshvardhana and beginning of the rule of Sultans of Delhi 1206 AD is designated by some historians as late ancient, but by some as early medieval. First, we are discussing the polity, and let me tell you, I won't discuss here the very basic thing of which dynasties were ruling at that time or what were the kings who were ruling during the Sultanate period, or when we will see the Mughal period also. Okay, so there won't be any, the imperial expansion of those kings, okay, of those dynasties where they were spreading their legs in the entire India, or what were the battles they were fighting, okay, to expand their territories. So I won't deal that part because that's already covered in your NCRTs in very basic manner. So here, as I already told you, we are going to cover things theme wise: the polity, the religion, the society, the science, technology, the art and culture, the literature, okay, in this way, all the 6-7 broad areas. So you will be able to imagine parallelly, okay, in polity, in that 600 to 1200 AD, up to 1200 AD, okay, it was like that. In Sultanate period, the polity was like that. These were the major characteristics. And in the Mughal period, the polity was like that. Likewise, we will follow for the literature. Okay, these were the author and their works in before 1200 AD. Okay, now in the Sultanate period, okay, this was the scene in the case of literature. Then you have the case with the Mughal India. Okay, we will see the literature all together just at once. Okay. Likewise, you have the religion. Likewise, you have the science and technological developments. Everything. So without much delay, just read with me, revise with me, or just enjoy the whatever I have written for you. Okay. Because believe me, I put a lot of effort to create this document when it comes specifically for medieval Indian history. So let's begin. So this is our first subset, polity, or you can say theme. Rise of Indian feudalism. Historians invoked a very prominent basis to demarcate these 6 centuries, and that is the dominance of Indian feudalism. Factors which led to it can be described as follows: 5 to 6 major factors. Number 1 was isolation of villages. By a process of craft diffusion among villages, there came about a breakdown of the previous dependence of the villages on towns. This formed the bedrock of a feudal order, which later resulted in the weakening of the centralized state and led to rise of localized aristocracies. Factor number 2 were untouchables as landless proletariat. This process of conversion of untouchables also reached an advanced stage within the first millennium AD. Third was urban decline. When villages became self-sufficient, they undermined trade and commerce, so ultimately decline in the urban culture witnessed. Fourth factor, scarcity of money capital. Gold and silver money tended to contract over most of India and even disappear. So this suggests a decline in the number of large commercial transactions due to scarcity, Interest rates were also high. Fifth factor was fiscal rights and rise of clan monarchies. The history of transferring these fiscal rights begins with the Shaka and Satwana's grants, okay, way back then, to Brahmanas in early 2nd century AD. Grants of similar terms to the rulers' kinsmen, vassals, and officials appear around the 8th century, and they become numerous only in the 11th century. And let me tell you, you have statements like this when you will see previous year question in the PYQ compilation set. You have one question like this, where they've given you one statement in this format. The statement based question. The appearance of these secular grants synchronized with the emergence of clan monarchies, where the kingdoms tended to be divided up among the members of the royal clans. Few examples: Gurjar Pratiharas, Gahadwals, Chahmanas, Pala, Sena, Chalukyas, etc. All these dynasties appear to have had broadly similar system of political organizations. And sixth factor was changing military techniques. By 7th century cavalry, you have a question on cavalry development. Cavalry surpassed the chariots by 7th century. The coming of stirrup and saddle have been responsible for the growing effectiveness obtained by horsemen in battle. And let me tell you, you have a verbatim line like this in one of your previous year question. Verbatim, many you will see. That's why I have not created the set-wise discussion on the basis of previous year question, because already things are covered from here. So why not just read or revise the chapter altogether, just at once and for all type, okay? The term Rajputra Rajput came in vogue for elite cavalry soldiers. They won many parts and expanded territories. It created political and military hierarchies. With Rajputras carving out villages in hereditary possession, there arose above them a class of rulers, variously styled Samanta, Thakura, Ranaka, and Nayaka. And these names are mentioned in several inscriptions. Arabic and Persian texts and in Lekha Paddhati, you have a previous year question on this. Unique collection of the documents of pre-Sultanate Gujarat. You can get a hit in your upcoming prelims from here. The king tended to become the mere head of a confederacy of such chiefs. Now, all the major dynasties ruled during this period has been covered comprehensively in chapter 10 of Upinder Singh. You must refer that notes only. Here I am just writing something important about Chola's naval prowess, and you have a question on this particular aspect of the Chola dynasty. In the South India, the military and naval powers of Cholas is certainly striking. The economic strength of Chola power probably rested on the role South India played in the Indian Ocean trade, serving as a convenient zone of transshipment between the Red Sea, Persian Gulf and Southeast Asia. The monopoly of horses imported from Iran gave added strength on land to the Cholas. So this was your first theme of part 1, the polity section. Your second theme of this part is science and technology, up to 1200 AD, okay? 600 to this will be a period for this part 1, okay? Now we are going to read the science and technological developments in this particular period. A crucial aspect of civilization which one is often apt to overlook while studying pre-modern societies is the extent of their openness to technological change. Developments in domain of agriculture, warfare, crafts, maths, astronomy, medicine, etc. made many things possible, and UPSC focuses on this development and this development if you see the previous year questions. First we will see the agriculture part. We are in the science and technology, and first we are going to read about agriculture of this period. What were the technological developments in the field of agriculture during that period? Certain improvements in agricultural techniques can be traced during this period. As the number of crops cultivated grew in ancient times, irrigation became an increasingly important element of agricultural technology. Central India and the peninsula are eminently suitable for reservoirs created by embankments thrown across gorges or narrow outlets in hilly and undulating terrain. In the millennium, India became one of the great zones of tank irrigation. Ruins of the great reservoir of King Bhoja in central India or the one at Madag in Karnataka show that immense work could be attempted. The Grand Anicut, a masonry dam to take off irrigation canals from the Kaveri, was built under the Great Cholas. Much of India's irrigation was and still is derived from tapping underground water through wells. Oxen were used to draw buckets. In order to give continuous flow, people made use of the noria and araghatta, pots on spokes, a Persian wheel of ancient texts. I won't repeat the things again that okay, this was your previous year question or that, because I believe only these 4 video discussions, or if you are reading the notes, just 60 pages of those notes are delivering you approximately, if by now we know that 160 previous year questions are from medieval Indian history. So if I say a rough approximate figure, if I give it to you, then out of 160 you are getting approximately 80 to 90 questions. 80 to 90 questions straight from these notes in medieval Indian history. And let me tell you, those are that questions which are slightly bouncers, slightly unconventional, where we barely know the source of those questions. So I again repeat, I again emphasize, the notes of medieval Indian history are so simple, very well arranged. Just read them twice or thrice and you are good to go with all the bouncer questions if they appear in your upcoming prelims. Because in CDS 2024 and the combined Geo-Scientist, verbatim questions get framed from here, and I will tell you those parts specifically. From one page you are having 2 questions, straight 2 questions just from the one page. You will see that. Okay. Drawbar. What's that? By which cattle could be made to move in circles to carry out threshing. Was unknown in ancient texts, and there is no evidence of rotary handmills before 5th century AD. The first example being found at Kunala Monastery, Takshila. Reference to threshing by bullocks going around Medhi post are found in Abhidha. What is this? Let's break it in the syllabus. The syllabus mentioned in this word is Mala. Okay, this is Mala. Abhidhana Ratnamala. Abhidhana Ratnamal. Found in Abhidhana Ratnamal and Vijayanti, while the Ramacharita composed in Bengal also explicitly mentions threshing by bullocks. Once the use of drawbar became known, cattle could be used to turn sugar and oil mills. Another interesting addition to domestic animal stock was that of the one-humped camel, dromedary camels, so useful for ploughing, other draught work and patch transport in dry, warm countries. So these were your agricultural developments in the field of science technology. Now, what happened with the crafts? In crafts, India had developed 2 important devices for cotton processing. Indian cotton gin for separating seed from fiber. It is in its early form reached China from India by the 13th century. Bow scutch, what is it? For separating the fibers themselves. It transmitted to the Islamic world by the 11th century and reached Western Europe in 15th century from India. What was the scene with military technology? Chariots disappeared from the war scenes by the 7th century. Cavalry was the new thing, and 3 inventions, remember these, accompanied it. Saddle, iron stirrup, iron horseshoe. And you have a question on this. Can you believe? These things were necessary to win wars during that time. In Europe and Islamic countries, a horseman fitted with all these 3 things was able to fight well. But in Indian subcontinent, all these 3 technologies were able to be fully accompanied with the horse only by the time of Delhi Sultanate rule. These cavalry inventions led to the mounted archer becoming the mainstay of the armies of the sultans. But still, the process was slow, and it was only in the 15th century that the Vijayanagar emperors began enrolling mounted archers. The Arabs used Greek fire, naphtha, and mangonels. Won't repeat. I'm just writing. Verbatim it is there in your combined Geo-Scientist exam. Munjanik. The Arabs used Greek fire, naphtha, and mangonels in their wars. It isn't certain if Indian armies before the Sultanate made any attempt to incorporate these devices in their military equipage. What happened with the maths? The earliest use of the place value system in Indian inscriptions is found in the Mankani plates from Gujarat. 0 appears as a dot in the 8th century plate and as a full drawn circle in plates of 870 and 876 AD. The Indian decimal notation was itself the creation of a mathematical tradition of great vigor. This tradition reached zenith with Brahmagupta and his Brahmisphut Siddhanta. The level of mathematical advance is indicated by the subjects this work covers. Some of them are just giving some example in your answer. Okay, I wrote this from the mains perspective, okay, because your notes are just notes for prelims as well as for mains. There is no separate things, no double burden kind of thing, okay, for prelims is something different, for mains is something different. I have created the notes in the most simple manner for you to use them, be it for prelims, be it for mains. This is the only idea. So where I was, yeah. The level of mathematical advance is indicated by the subjects this work covers. Some of them are just giving some example in your answer: square and cube roots, rule of 3, interest, progressions, geometry, etc. In prelims you can get just like this: Brahmisphut Siddhanta is the work of Brahmagupta, or match the author and work in that manner. Algebraic signs like x, negative appear in the Bakshali manuscript 7th century. You have a question in Bakshali manuscript. Bhaskara too wrote Leelavati on arithmetic and Bijaganit on algebra. Much of Indian mathematics reached the Arabic world between the 8th and 11th century and thence traveled to medieval Europe. Astronomy, the most favorite domain of UPSC. Aryabhatta I, in his Aryabhatiya, extended the mathematical method to solve problems of astronomy. Varamihir, 6th century, who wrote Panchasiddhantika and Brihat Samhita, followed Aryabhatta in supporting the true explanations of the lunar and solar eclipses. Brahmagupta is more systematic and comprehensive than his predecessors in the treatment of astronomical and mathematical themes in his Brahmisphut Siddhanta 628 AD work. In the later work, the Khandaka, what is this? Khandaka. How to pronounce it? This is Khand Khyadak. In a later work, the Khand Khyadak, he simplified astronomical calculations while largely adopting Aryabhatta systems. Both of his works passed into Arabic as Sindhind and Arkand in 8th century and played their part in transmitting Indian astronomical theories to the Islamic world. Al-Baruni's Kitab al-Hind, composed in Punjab in 1035 AD, also describes Indian astronomical system. Bhaskar too wrote Siddhant Shiromani, which deals with epicyclic eccentric theories for planetary motions. It was epicyclic eccentric theories, where in the Bhaskar II's Siddhant Shiromani, planetary motions it talks about. What were the works in the field of medicine? In the 7th century came the compendium of 8 topics of medicine, the Ashtanga Sangraha of Vagbhat, a very important document, followed by the Ashtanga Hriday Samhita of another Vagbhat, same, but these two Vagbhats were different. Just as a mnemonic, remember Ashtanga, Ashtang. If you are getting something from the field of medicine, it is by Vagbhat. Now, Madhavkar in 9th century wrote Rugvinishchaya, a work on diagnosis and pathology. Dridbhala revised and enlarged the Charak Samhita. Another work is, it's your PYQ in CDS this year. Another work is Chikitsa Sar Sangraha, a treatise on therapeutics by Chakrapani Datta. An important feature of the Ayurveda is its insistence on medication and abstention and recognition of elementary surgical practice. Translations of both Sushrut and Charak Samhitas appeared in Arabic by the 9th century, and Ayurveda was partly absorbed into the Arabic medicine, the core of which nevertheless remained Greek. The urge to obtain the elixir of life was central to Indian alchemy, and mercury was the principal metal studied. Ras Ratnakar of Nagarjuna is a work related to this. Related to what? Indian alchemy and the use of mercury. Now we are moving to our third subset, religion. What were the developments in the domain of religion from 600 to 1200 AD? It's all here. The triumph of Brahmanism. When Chinese monks visited India during 7th century, Buddhism still maintained a strong presence. But by the 11th century, epigraphic records and remains of religious structures points to an increasing prosperity of the Brahmins and their cults, and to the decline of Buddhism. Why it happened? These are some major reasons, and let me remind you, this was one of your previous year questions too. One of the strengths of Brahmanism was its claim to prescribe the social laws and ritual for the laity as part of the Dharma Shastra, in which Buddhism offered little or no competition. The basic texts of these laws, called Smritis, continued to be composed till the beginning of 7th century AD. The connection of Brahmanism with the caste system tended to become more and more close and unshakable. The other major aspect of Brahmanism giving it an increasing space in the popular mind was Bhakti and devotionalism. We will see Bhaktism and Sufism movement, and you have your separate set in previous year question compilation. Around 26 questions are there. So this is indeed one of the most important theme also, Bhaktism and Sufism. Now, under Brahmanical fold, there were several cults of worship which prevailed in this time period. These can be seen here. Vaishnavism. By 600 AD, developed a system in which Vishnu could be conceived as God. Al-Biruni is perhaps the first known scholar to treat the Bhagavad Gita as the central philosophical and moral text of Hinduism. In the south, Vaishnavism developed a distinct devotional cult led by the Alvars. These had successors in the Acharyas, the first being the Nath Muni, previous year question. Vishnu's incarnation, Krishna, ignited love in the devotee and inspired one of the greatest creations of the Sanskrit, Jayadev's Geet Govind. The cult of Shiva Parvati or Shaivism continued to be a rival to Vaishnavism. In the south, the Nayanars gave a theistic thrust to Shiva worship. From a very early period, Shaivism provided in Parvati, Durga, the female principle of creation, the fountainhead of Tantrism. A large body of Shiva worshippers followed the Agama, text of 5th century showing distinct tantric influences. These were followed by the Yamalas, 6th to 10th century, evidencing a new pantheon in which various goddesses like Kali represented aspects of Shakti, power or energy. This was a rich period too for Brahmanical philosophical thought. The most celebrated philosopher of this period was Shankaracharya, 750 AD approximately. To Shankara, knowledge Gyan was everything, since the reality of God Brahman could only be grasped through it. He provided an ideological framework for a unity in diversity with whose aid medieval and modern Hinduism could evolve into a single, increasingly monotheistic religion. Shankara wrote Bhashya or commentary on the Brahma Sutra and various commentaries on the Upanishads. His doctrine became widespread in northern India, probably only in the 15th to 16th century. The most influential onslaught on Shankara's reading of Vedanta came from Ramanuja, your previous year question, and I hope you remember where I show you a diagram. Okay, what was the mode of salvation? Okay, suggested by Ramanujacharya and Shankaracharya. Fine. Ramanujacharya purely talks about the devotion, okay, to reach the salvation, whereas Shankaracharya talks about the knowledge only. So this was your question in 2023 Civil Services Prelims. So you can get this here for Shankaracharya also. Okay, likewise. So the most influential onslaught on Shankara's reading of Vedanta came from Ramanuja. He argued in Vedanta Sara in favor of the separate existence of souls and for the achievement of perpetual bliss through bhakti or devotion to deity. Ramanuja was followed by Madhava, 12th century, who asserted 5 fundamental dualisms, Dvaita, and by Vallabha, 1376 to 1430 AD, who combined monism with bhakti. There can be a question on chronology of Shankaracharya, Ramanuja, Madhava and Vallabha, important for prelims. Now what was the landscape for Buddhism and Jainism this time? So Buddhism and Jainism. As for Buddhism first, both its major components, the Theravada and Mahayana, were affected by its decline. Within the Mahayana school, which incorporated the concept of grace within an essentially non-theistic religion, tantric tendencies began to develop, marked by an emphasis on the efficacy of mantras, mudras and rites. The principles are already present in the Guhya Samaj and Manjushri Mulakalpa. The cult of Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, made into a divine personage, and his consort Tara, the goddess of compassion, became increasingly popular. I covered Tara in your Rupinder Singh notes, and if I tell you the cover page of your Rupinder Singh book, the photo what you see on that cover page is of Tara. So this Tantra influenced Mahayana was to be a major source of the later Tibetan Buddhism. The literary and cultural contributions of Jainism in this period were considerable. Jain philosophy, in which the unity of change and permanence was strongly stressed, had its prolific spokesmen in Haribhadra and Hemachandra. Can you see Hemachandra, Bhavabhuti? Who were these Jain monks? Another PYQs, of course, in ancient India, but also here. Although the Brahmanical, Buddhist, and Jain pursued different beliefs, they all largely coexisted peaceably. Buddhists and Jains mainly suffered due to persecutions. Since Sanskrit had now become the language which Buddhists and Jains also used extensively, there was also much ground for exchange of polemics. Now, the coming of Islam. One major alteration in the religious contours of early medieval India was the arrival of Islam. The Arabian Peninsula was home to both nomad and agricultural population. Mecca was one of the most prosperous towns here. The navigational use of the monsoons had made it possible from the 1st century BC onwards for vessels to sail across the Arabian Sea to India. As sailing ships found it difficult to sail up to the Red Sea, land caravans travelled from the Yemen ports to the Levant, Syria and Palestine, and the towns of Mecca lay astride this route. Its people, the Quraysh, controlled much of the trade and their possession of the sacred temple of Kaaba. Here, a wide respected merchant, given to lonely meditation and devotion, announced that he was receiving revelations containing God's messages and gathered an expanding circle of followers. This merchant was Muhammad, the messenger of God. This was the duration 570 to 632 AD. And the revelations he recited in Arabic later formed in the Quran, the sacred scripture of Islam. Islam is a strongly monotheistic religion, the absolute unity and power of God being strongly emphasized, along with hostility to any kind of image worship. It shares much with the Judaic and Christian traditions, as also the belief in Satan and the Day of Judgment. From 622 to 632, the Prophet was in control of an expanding community, Ummah, at Medina, and this necessitated legislation of the code by which its people had to live. Some of its fundamentals were provided by revelations, supplemented by the Prophet's own statements and practice, Sunnah, reports of which came to constitute Hadith. Muslim law, Sharia, mainly grew on the basis of the Quran, and the Hadith and the use of analogy and elaboration by jurists. After the Prophet's death, despite some internal conflicts, his successors, Khalifa or Caliphs, succeeded in not only subduing the Arabian Peninsula but in also conquering most of West Asia, Iran, and Egypt. When the non-dynastic caliphate was replaced by the Umayyad dynasty, a fresh wave of expansion began that saw Arab armies occupy Spain, North Africa, and Central Asia. In 711 to 714 AD, much of the Indus Basin, Sindh and southern Punjab was annexed by the Arab Empire. It was the conquest of Sindh which established strong Muslim communities in a fairly large region within India. By the time of the conquest of Sindh, the Arab rulers had worked out a system of coexistence which conquered non-Muslim people. Chachanama furnishes detailed evidence for the fact that the Hindus in Sindh were deemed to be treated at par with Jews and Christians. A large degree of tolerance extended to them and to their place of worship, so long as they paid kharaj, the land tax, and jizya, poll tax. The grants earlier made to Brahmins out of the state revenues were continued. On the other hand, a Brahmanical text, Devala Smriti, prescribes rituals for cleansing men and women tainted by contact with the Mlechas or Muslims. Islam too had internal convulsions. The Great Schism over the question of the privileges of the descendants of the Prophet Muhammad, especially through the line of his cousin and son-in-law Ali, in time involved both theological and political issues. Al-Baruni says that later extensive raids and despoiling of temples by Muhammad of Ghazni caused much bitterness among Indians. Another important development within Islam was that of Sufism or Islamic mysticism. Uncorroborated ideas are also that Indian concepts of nirvana or bhakti being transmitted from Sindh to the Arab world. Anyway, by the 11th century, Sufism had become a recognized component of Islam. An early comprehensive text of its different aspects was composed by Ali Hujwiri, who wrote Kashful Mahjub, the unveiling of the veiled, in Persian. The writing of this work not only marked the maturity of Sufism as a systematic body of beliefs and practices, but is also a firm announcement of the system's arrival in India. Now, the literature. Literature of which period? 600 to 1200 AD. Languages. There was always a difference between the languages elite people spoke and ordinary people have spoken. By the 7th century AD, Sanskrit largely displaced the different forms of Prakrit, supposed to be the language of ordinary people. Sanskrit evolved as the language of priests and bureaucrats. It was the language of literature, administration, and law until the end of 12th century, whereafter it had to share this position with Persian. Like Sanskrit, Persian too was entirely a language of the elite in India, confined to the rulers and the educated only. Persian became practically the official language of the Ghaznavid Empire, and by the latter half of the 11th century, India had its first notable Persian poet, Masood Salman, belonging to the Ghaznavid court. What were the major works of Sanskrit literature during this period? These 600 years form the richest period of Sanskrit literature. Major seminal works is summarized in this table, important for your prelims. And what are these? You have Vakyapadiya by Bhritrahari, Sanskrit grammar. Your work, who was the author, and what is this work about? Then you have Dash Kumar Charita by Dandin. It is Tale of 10 Princes. Then you have Kavyadarsh. It's by Dandin, Science of Poetics. Then you have Vasav Datta by Subandhu on romance. Harshcharita, very easy. Bana, Harsha's Rule. Kadambari, also by Ban. Amar Kosha by Amar Sinha. He's mentioned in one of your previous year question. Dictionary in Sanskrit he wrote. Basically the Amar Kosha is a dictionary in Sanskrit. Then you have Kavyalankara by Vaman, late 8th century work. Same work by Bhamaha also. It is about ideas on poetry. Then you have Vikramank Dev Charita by Bilhana during late 11th century AD. It's a historical epic. Rajatrangini, very famous, by Kalhan. It's on rulers of Kashmir. Also give you the genealogy of those kings. Geet Govinda is by Jaydev. Radha and Krishna's story. Panchatantra is by Pandit Vishnu Sharma. Animal Tales. Hitopdesha is by Narayana. Bengali commentary on Panchatantra. Now there is a special note on your Panchatantra. In early version, probably akin to the Indian collection known as Tantrikhyayika, was rendered, this is your Tantrikhyayika, was rendered into Pahlavi in Iran in the 6th century AD and was translated thrice into Arabic by 750 AD under the title Kalilava Dimna. It is your previous year question. In 2022, I guess. Not in civil service prelims, but in other exam of UPSC. Now, languages of the South. The developments in the South were notably different. Tamil first appears in inscriptions as Tamil Brahmi as early as 2nd century BC and afterwards in the Sangam text as a literary language. The first inscriptions in Kannada and Telugu belong to the 6th or 7th century AD. Literature in Telugu has been traced to 11th century. Malayalam, the 4th major Dravidian language, achieved firm literary status only in 14th or 15th century AD. What about the other languages? Outside the southern zone, Prakrits of some dialects like Maharashtri, Shorseni, Magadhi continued to be used mainly by the Jains. At the same time, a new species of literary languages, termed Apabhransha, it is your previous year question, appeared in recognizable forms by the 6th century out of mixtures of regional vernaculars with the Prakrits and Sanskrit. Modern regional languages are datable to the 11th and 12th century in case of Bengali, Odia, Gujarati and Marathi. The literature of them, however, belong to a much later period. Now we have the 5th subset or the 5th theme of this part, art. The development of art during this period. Architecture first. From the 7th century onward, India witnessed the development of its classical architecture in stone. Till now, architectural marvels was in form of caves, monolith, etc. But the emphasis was now on stone block construction. The arch, vault, dome, as well as mortar cement remained strangers to Indian masons till the 13th century. We will see the development of these things, the dome, vault and the arch, in part 2, which will be the Delhi Sultanate era. Kindly note that I am not covering temple architecture of this period here because it has already been covered in your comprehensive and detailed manner in Appendix 3 of Upinder Singh. So for this, refer that thing only. If you have revised, fine. If not, then please do that. Painting. The medieval tradition whose early representation mingles with Ajanta survivals at Ellora, 8th to 9th century, is characterized by sharp lines, absence of color modeling and decoration. This medieval element is stronger still the wall painting of South Indian temples at Tanjore and Tirumalai among others. Non-mural paintings have survived on palm leaves from the Pala period in eastern India and Nepal until the 13th century. Finally, we have the Gujarat miniatures, made usually in the gem palm leaf manuscripts. Music and dance both became more mature during this period. Important information on music is found in the Natya Shastra Bharat Muni, but comprehensive texts on music came much later, such as Sharangadeva's Sangeet Ratnakara, 11th early 10th century work, followed by Damodar's Sangeet Darpan and the anonymous Gunyatul Munya in the Persian. There is no mention of author about this work, so just remember that this is a work on music only. Gunyatul Munya. The Natya Shastra laid down rules for dance too. The art of dance in its most skilled forms was patronized at the royal courts and the temples. The profession of dancing women and courtesans were often combined, and the Devdasis or temple courtesans appeared to have formed a fairly large class. Now we have the last set of this particular part, society during this period. How was the caste system? Indian feudalism is also related to certain changes in the caste system. The caste system during this period became more rigid and took its classical shape. Pastoral communities like the Jats of Sindh were humiliated, but this system was not changeless. Many castes revolted and got recognition of clean castes. The Jats were later held to be Shudras, and so they were no longer the outcast. South India was also witnessing some pattern of decentralized political structures. Unlike North India, there were no recognized twice-born caste of Kshatriya and Vaishyas in South India. What was the situation of women? Harsher customs were imposed on women, of which the sati. What was sati? Widow burning among the higher castes is one such example. The practice is of ancient date, the first known case being reported of ritual burning of the widow of an Indian captain in Iran in 316 BC. Famous poet Ban criticized the sati ritual, but later by the 11th century it had become widespread all over India, except the extreme south, among the widows of rulers, nobles and warriors. Women slaves were also there. The Lekha Paddhati shows that women, when sold into slavery, legally lost their caste status and family ties and could be obliged to do all kind of works under constant threat of physical violence and torture. Few soothing examples also tells that situation was not that grim when we see the famous sculpture at Khajuraho of the literate women shown writing. A woman called Jayamati also became Queen of Kashmir and earned great repute for her wisdom and benevolence. So what is my take now on this particular part which I have written? This part may have told you about some new aspects for mains as well as prelim point of view. Some things are obviously not important for prelims, but they will surely help you to write your essays or questions on GS paper 1 of mains 2. For prelims perspective, just focus here. I highlighted the things which you have already seen in the yellow. So do remember the Lekha Paddhati. You have a previous year question on this, and because you already have a question on Lekha Paddhati in the history optional paper, chronology of Bhakti saints and Sanskrit literary works can be possible questions in prelims to remember them. With this, I would like to end this video discussion of your part 1. See you soon in the part 2, which will be the Delhi Sultanate. Thank you so much.